Time for a real-world example of data from a real person concerning handling a high INR. Now, I'm assuming you understand the basics of the INR and the ideas like reservoirs, and in particular, the concept of nudging. I will provide a real-world story. It actually happened this way. I didn't make it up. The patient is a self-doser and a self-tester and knows and plans on the fact that the natural variation can be as high as 2.4. The patient has been taking 5 milligrams of Warfarin over the years as standard and recently for several months. Now, here's some data for context. On the 30th of the 5th, the INR was 3.9. A few weeks later, it was 2.9, then 2.7, and then up to 3.8 and back to 3.3. Up a bit to 3.5, up a lot to 4, and then back to 3.2, 3.3 and 3.2. On the 16th of 10th, it was 4.2. So what do you do? Most people, most doctors, and most charts and algorithms, and most computer programs will say, decrease the dose by 10%. Now here's a sidetrack. Decrease the dose by 10%. Remember I said the INR curve is not linear. You're not dealing with a normal curve, and for the statisticians among you that will say a lot. But basically there is no symmetry in the curve. The higher INR figures are very sensitive to dose. You can make a 10% change in a low INR, but you make a 5% change in a high INR, at least initially. If you really must make a dose change, make it 5%. That's another principle that I have been arguing for. And unless, of course, you know from patient history that they always need the full 10% in order to make a difference. So what do you do with a figure of 4.2, which is way outside the desired range of 2.5 to 3.5? Based on Kim et al. 2010, already referred to in previous videos, the high INR is probably due to chance. Therefore, do nothing and retest soon. By soon, I mean 7 to 14 days. I agreed with that. The patient, agreed with Kim's analysis. It was only 4.2. Therefore, not even nudging was necessary. 2 weeks later, you'll see there's a second 4.2. 4.2 is still a bit too high. What should be done? What to do? Now, Kim et al., the ones I like, would say the first time it's chance, therefore do nothing. Second time, do something. Now here, another sidetrack. Research is needed. How long do these extremes last? Where is the research? How long is it safe to leave alone an extreme? Where is the research? This information is needed to work out how quickly you have to act when you get a figure between 4 and 5 or higher. This information is needed, and all doses need it, so they can decide how long to wait before doing something. Well, the patient was willing to risk another 2 weeks at an INR of 4.2 or higher. You see, the patient, myself, has got good memory and has got coming on now 30 years of self-data. Now, in this case, obviously the patient can't remember the data, but they build up a feel for what results can be right and what can be wrong. And in this case, the patient knew without checking that they have rarely needed less than 5 milligrams. So to take a dose change, 10% dose change, down to 4.5, or even a 5% change down to 4.75, was risking a swing back to an INR which was too low. You see, 2 4.2 scores is 2 test results in the context of history is very, very weak evidence for taking a drastic decision like a dose change. So, the patient took the risk, 4.2, 4.2, and then 4.6. What do you do? Surely by now it's pretty obvious that something needs to be done, because the INR is staying persistently high and it's just not reverting to a lower INR. Now, what is the standard advice? The standard advice, as one example of it, would be Kim et al., and I quote, "Hold for 1 day and decrease weekly dose by 10%. Repeat the INR determination in 7 to 14 days." So the INR is 4.6. What else could you do? Apart from the question that a dose change should be 5% for high INR, unless you have good reason to make it higher. The 2 other options. The first one is to nudge. For instance, taking 3 milligrams, 4 milligrams, 4.5, then 5, as usual. And then test in 2 weeks' time. And if still high, then nudge followed by a dose reduction of 5%. The other option is to do nothing. And the self-doser can get away with it, but medical staff would probably think that was unethical. Context is everything. In this case, the patient, I've said, has always never had a dose of 5 milligrams. And you should never decide a dose based on only the last 3 figures. The bottom line is this figure of 4.6 was based on a case history that they were taking a low dose and achieved 4.6. Therefore, I took the decision, no change. 2 weeks later, Nature obliged. After doses of 4.2, 4.2, and 4.6, I got a nice comfortable 2.8. Back in range. Phew! Note a jump of 1.8 in 1 week. These are the swings. How far do the swings continue? Nature had self-corrected. It was almost like an avalanche, and then back to normal. Sorry, I'm just getting the slide. Surprises continue. After a dose of 4.6, then 2.8, there was a 2.2. This means a change in INR of 2.4. A swing from 4.6 to 2.2. The 2.2 results was confirmed with a retest on the same machine. So why this swing? Why this low result? Is this low result chance, level, or dose? Should I ignore it, nudge it, or change the dose? Here is where an evaluation of danger is needed. A low INR is very dangerous, and the margin is small. The result of 2.2 could actually be lower because of the margin of error, and could actually be on 2 or less with a fear of 2.2. And I had just been at a high INR, therefore a dose increase is unlikely. Therefore, nudge. Here are the consequences of the nudging. When I nudged, it pushed me up only to 2.6, and then the next time it was 2.1. My conclusion was that nudging didn't work, nudging wasn't enough. Therefore, I nudged with a small dose increase of 5%. I know this is going against my 10%, 5% guidelines, but at this point, because I'd already been at an extreme, I thought I'd use the 5% and see what happens. It could always be increased again if monitoring is continued quickly. So therefore, nudge with a small dose and an increase of 5%, i.e. 0.25 milligram. And after that, the patient was stable for several months in the range 2.5 to 4.3. So, conclusions. What would have happened at the beginning, the INR of 4.2, if the patient had followed the conventional advice of a 10% decrease in dose? The conclusions don't bear to think about. It's highly likely I would have had a result of 2 or less, which is really putting me in danger of clots. The patient held their nerve 3 times and ended up with a higher stable daily dose. This is warfarin dosing.